Right. All right. Welcome to this Audit and Risk Committee meeting. I understand you've got a busy day with a number of meetings. So if you wish to like to open the KTF.
Ko ranga nui ki ronga, ko papatua no kukirara. Ko tātou ta ira tangata, ki wana nui te kei mauri o. Sky Father above, Mother Earth below, all of us in the middle, breath of life.
Kia ora. Thank you. We've got one apology from Councillor Steve. Can I have that mover, please? Kerry. Seconded. Thank you. All those in favour? Thank you. No. Thank you. Public forum, we don't have no public forum. In terms of no items that are not on the agenda, but I would like to, with the committee's the declarations of conflict of interest, and in terms of the order of business, we'll do the minutes, and then if we can bring the adoption of the annual report forward, because we've got Fiona from Audit New Zealand in the room, and I think she's got something which she'd like to do, if that's okay with the committee. So are there any declarations of conflict of interest that need to be declared? I've got one minor one, just for complete disclosure, in terms of the investigation, in terms of the report of errors of direct debit. I'm not a ratepayer, so I don't need to worry about that. I'm not on direct debits. But the report writer is a colleague of mine. We do a lot of work together, and he also then used me as a sounding board in terms of some of the reporting. But it was his report. I didn't actually influence the report, or I was just used, but just for complete transparency, I thought that should be just noted for everyone's attention. Thank you. Can I have then, my first item is confirmation of our minutes held 22nd of October, and it seems like yesterday. Can I have an approver? Is Councillor John, seconded by Councillor Mike, by a finger, thank you. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Carried. First item 7.2, the adoption of the annual report, which also then comes with a sequential piece of big time reader. So who's little desk? Do we have any extra chair for swing that? Oh, just around. For Fiona. Right. So we take the is read. Thanks, Ben. And is there any highlights or further information you want to bring to the committee's attention?
Morning, Chief Philip and councillors. So in terms of what was presented back in October for draft 1, the numbers haven't really moved. We had signalled back in October that the team was still working on finalising the capitalisation, major budget variances, and the financial prudent benchmarks. And I'll take honest detail over those. With this version of the draft AR that is being recommended for adoption, our surplus, as I've covered up in the report, has decreased by 2.5 million, but that was due in part driven by the finalisation of the capitalisation. So we've now captured in depreciation. Not much has changed in terms of the revenue, but there was just a few shifts in the operating expenditure that came out of the audit review. I think the team also flagged back in October that we had, during the QA process, noticed that there was a discrepancy with our revaluation and our unit rates for the roading. So through that correction, we've seen an increase in the asset revaluation by $21 million. But other than that, nothing else has really changed. And from here, Fiona and her team are just in the final stages of completing the audit, the review work. with the intention to provide us with clearance this Friday. And from our discussions with Fiona and her team, that any other changes that flow in from today will be just purely presentational. So if there are no other questions in this space, and I will hand over to Fiona to
Thank you. Welcome, Fiona.
Okay, sorry, I pretty much reiterated what we've said here. I was hoping to be able to circulate a draft opinion, but we've had an issue which has affected a lot of councils this year around the smooth TE measure. And there's been a few councils with complications around that, and we've had to do some extra work. So we were working through queries on that as of Monday, and we just have to run it back through our technical team just to say, we don't think there's a problem, so we don't think there's any opinion on that. We just need them to come back and say that there's nothing else we need to follow up, and we're okay on that particular measure. And so thank you to the infrastructure team too. That was a lot of questions that we were asking in a lot more detail than what we would have previously looked at that measure. So that's sort of the delay in getting a draft opinion circulated, and I also have to clear it through our peer reviewer as well. In general, the audit's actually gone really well. The revaluation process has been painless from our point of view. There'll probably be still some outstanding, I know there's been a lot of recommendations made prior years in relation to that, but I would have most of them expected to be I'll need to liaise a bit with Debbie. Still be a bit outstanding on some of that, but from my perspective, that's gone really, really well, and there's a good process in place, so it's just moving it forward and scheduling, bringing that forward to you back into it more time on your audit going forward. We have had a bit of sickness on our team, which has sort of caused us some delays too in finishing off our final works, and there's probably a few more late queries coming through to the finance team, so I do apologise for that. Unfortunately, COVID's had this thing on its tail, and it made a few staff and and I'd just like to thank the finance team for all their help. I think we've developed a pretty good relationship over this last few months, and we've basically had to do the interim and final audit at the same time. So it does seem like we've been working on the audit for a long time for this final report, but that's one of the reasons why. And so we've already been able to bring some forward some work for next year because we're essentially doing the system. And I think we'll just have to look at the scheduling for next year to try and bring back into more of a normal routine and process for the annual report, so you can sign off with it in October next year. So I'll just keep liaising with Sarah and Beth about how we can do that going forward, and bringing some work forward where we can next year. But I think we're in a good place to do that this year. No long-term plan to complete. And yeah, if you've got any questions.
Any questions of Fiona? Councillor Scott.
Thanks very much, Mr. Chair. Thank you for the update. The team, thank you so much for the huge work to this. Just a couple of questions, and perhaps using some of your experience, Mr. Chair, as I sort of understand the process. Would it be usual for us to adopt the annual report without us having seen the auditor's opinion?
Can I clarify? So we're not actually recommending, sorry, what this committee is doing, we're not adopting this meeting, we're just recommending to council that they adopt it, having gone through it in a lot of detail. Normally what happens is council would normally, correct me if I'm right, wrong, Fiona, normally what would happen is council would adopt the unaudited accounts, the auditor would then give their opinion, and then you'd adopt the audited financial, right?
That happens in
A council meeting. And normally the auditor is willing to provide the audit opinion until council has actually gone through the annual report in detail, because technically this is your report. Right? It's your report written by staff, but you're then endorsing it for the community. So that's, that to me I think is really important, that you actually say, are there any, that's why we're having this committee meeting today, so we can delve into a lot more detail around the annual report rather than actually going to council and using, I do have some questions, right? So I'll leave those to the end. We'll let other people go through. So I do have some comments and some require some explanation from Fiona and Andy on that. I'll leave it over. It's helpful, Mr. Chair. All right. Any other questions?
Sorry, would you like me just, I may have jumped the gun and kept my commentary quite brief, so I can elaborate on what between now and adoption, so what other steps are involved.
Thank you. Yep,
So,
that would be useful.
yeah, the recommendation is come to the art committee for adoption of the annual report next Wednesday, the 18th. So the purpose of today's report was just to give an update for the changes from draft 1 to where we stand now, pending any further presentational changes that come out from the auditors, which we're expected to have all wrapped up by Friday. During that time also we need to have a summary annual report prepared that needs to be available to the public within 30 days of adoption. So in conjunction with Fiona and her team finalising the audit of the annual report, they will also, once they're happy that no other changes are required for the full annual report, will then review the summary annual report and then also provide an opinion.
Any other questions? I've got, I think, this is a complimentary on the revaluation to the team. I'm yet, Fiona, and your experiences, but I've seen a few horrendous revaluations and even fair value assessments this year, and the fact that went smoothly indicates good performance from both parties.
Yes, so we did front foot it, I think, earlier in the audit process with some questions that we would normally be asking as part of our audit, but those are the things that council management should also ask when they're reviewing those valuations, and we involve the valuer in that process as well. So I think that really helps clarify some of maybe where we come from some of our questions as well. So it's made it a lot smoother process. I won't say that the inflationary pressures has probably helped a little bit because it's not those significant movements that you would have been seeing in prior years, which is we did some shit around the country in terms of valuations. It's a little bit sort of peak back now. So, but the annual process and the way that you're doing unit rates, I think we're able to quite easily tie most of that back to contract rates, and that's something that we're meant to be doing. It's it can prove quite problematic at some councils to be able to do that. It wasn't an issue as time. I think it's just an improvement in the process over the last few years.
Can you just elaborate more, because I'm very much aware of this road smoothness measure, and correct me if I'm wrong, Fiona, my understanding is this is a DIA mandatory measure. But I understand that the Auditor General has requested that it now be given a lot more emphasis, so a lot more work has actually gone into the auditing of that in the previous years. It's now a significant measure, is that, am I correct?
Yeah.
And part of I'm not sure what the specific issues were here, but other councils haven't done the traffic counts and other measures on an annual basis, and that has also caused grief.
So I think we've sort of got some of it's when they've done the last roughness surveys. That's not an issue for Terra because it's a 2 year sort of, as long as everything's sort of done in the last 2 years, it's definitely not an issue. The counts, I think, have been catching out a lot of big councils, and that's probably the area that we have done more with COVID than we have done in prior years. So most of your counts are done in May to May period. So in terms of that, they're done within a two-year period. Slightly outside like an annual report cycle, but that's a disclosure. I think it's part of reporting that measure. From the audit team's perspective, we just wanted to make sure our technical team that actually got a problem with that, but with our initial conversations, I'm not expecting that. There were some counts that have been done more recent, but they haven't been using estimations of that actual STE result because they were going to be reflective of what the normal counts would be because they were resulting from extra trucks and stuff travelling through to pick up Cyclone Gabrielle. So yeah, so that makes sense. That makes sense to the audit team, I guess, in terms of why you wouldn't re-estimate, because when you do your best estimate, when you do that's counted. So but that's why it's turning out to be a little bit of a problem area this year, because there are councillors who may not have done things within that 2-year window. And also depending on the policy you might have for some low volume routes might be done on a less frequent basis, but actually makes sense.
Yeah, through you, Chief Philip, we've probably been told, I guess, but I may have forgotten, what exactly is a smooth travel exposure?
No problems.
So effectively, it's a ratio of how much movement across the network we've done on smooth roads. So we compare the roughness of the roads versus the amount of traffic, and that ratio is smooth traffic exposure. So I think the number for us was 96% of all the journeys or kilometres travelled on our network was smooth. So, yeah,
That's the result.
yeah, that's the result. And that's sort of ratio, and that's where we need to be. But like as Fiona mentioned, our traffic counts were a little bit here and there. Cyclone Gabrielle affected their program of works, and even if we had counted those roads, they would have been a little bit different than they would have been anyway. So that's where we did. Does that explain it?
I guess so. I'm quite happy just to sit there and accept that.
Yeah, and yeah, it is, well, because it actually does require those two measures, and this is a problem. You get one where it's not, this is what the auditors are saying, is, oh, well, we don't actually have up-to-date traffic counts, right? And how material, and how critical is those traffic counts for that particular council knowing a whole lot of conditions. Now, if you've seen a whole lot of growth in the last 2 years, or you've seen new industry or something, those traffic counts will change dramatically. But if you've got, Cyclone Gabrielle, you've got a nice stable district, you wouldn't expect traffic counts to actually change dramatically. So, it's a poor problem, isn't it?
And I think Hamish has signalled that it might become an issue next year in terms of when it gets taken over, in terms of how much of the road network is actually surveyed. And I think that's one of the other areas that some councils have been tripped up on, is they haven't surveyed sort of their whole network. We only surveyed part of it.
Yes, so NZTA are taking over the roughness survey, which they're only going to do part of everybody's network each year. So depending on when that's done, it'll affect the measure. So we'll probably have another discussion next year around the details, because the results will change, because we are used to doing full network every year.
Okay, I'll take that back to our local government sector group as well, and they may already be aware of that.
One option I have seen elsewhere, never used to do all its roads on a regular basis, but they used to have sample roads. So they said, we know that if this road, the traffic goes up, we know that then that's reflective of all these other roads that we actually don't do traffic counts on a regular basis. We might do traffic counts every 5 years across the whole network, but every year we will do our key roads, right? Because we know what if that road is having more traffic, then all these other 5 roads or 25 roads will be having also more traffic. And if that's having less, and then this road has less traffic, we know the other. That's another way of looking at it, Hamish, but it requires quite a lot of understanding of your network and traffic volumes too, which then needs to be satisfied by our good friends audit that is actually a good sample of everything. And this is the problem we're having across the sector, with not only the roading but also through we've seen when what was the local DHB doing your water not testing but actually validation. I think it was then moved to Hawaii last year, so this is going to be a continuing as things are moved within central government. Right? We're going to see these ongoing pressures, particularly when we've got these mandatory measures from the FIA. The last comment I want to make is, and I've already talked to both the Mayor and the Chief Executive, this year is a good news story, right? In terms of the financial results, you received 54 million of subsidy and you spent all the money. Right? Now that to me is a good news story. And I think I've recommended to both the Mayor and the Chief Executive that be now included within the Mayor and Chief Executive's report. Because I think, this is the annual report, if you actually read the Chief Executive's and Mayor's report, and then you look at the financials like I do, I go, didn't see that in the, that's a big issue, right? And I think that this needs to be enhanced before Councillor adopts it. So that's my own view. The other comments I've got too is a question for Beth as too, is technically, right? Because it's a policy of council, right? Were there any changes in accounting policies that you want to?
We added one new policy around the audit fees. If I correct you to page, bear with me while I find it. So if we go to page 168 of the agenda.
Of the attachment.
Of the attachment. It's second section, disclosure of fees for audit billing services, amendments to PDE of SAS 1. So that was the only additional.
Okay, thank you. That's all I've really got. So any further questions or comments? So if we go back to the agenda, I think we just need to tweak the recommendation a little bit. Obviously 1.1, I'm happy we received the report, no problems with that. I think 1.2 is the Audit and Risk Committee recommend to Council. So it's a recommend to Council with the Mayor and Chief Executive being delegated to make minor changes. So from what we've already got. And also that then that council will adopt it. All right, is everyone comfortable with that? Do I have a mover? Councillor John seconded. So I can't. Ioma, thank you. All those in favour. I can't see your name tag, sorry. I'm useless at names, right? Thank you. Thank you. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Thank you again very much, team. Thank you, Fiona. And we look forward to, well, I would see the opinion, or I'll see the opinion, of course, and your subsequent management letter.
Yes, yeah, I do want to work through that with Debbie as well, because obviously I think the 2022-23 one, and if I can close out issues for 23-24, obviously that's the time closing out for the 22-23 one. So.
And we will be receiving that in mid-February, so you might be back online to talk about that as well. But thank you. Yep. Thank you again, and if I don't, I'll see you on Friday anyway. All right, thank you very much. Thank you. So if we go back to the agenda, our next item is 7.1, investigation into errors on direct debit processing. Thank you, Mr. Chief Executive.
Thank you. I'm not going to go into a huge amount of detail. It's covering the report
is there to present Ross's investigation, and I'm no doubt that you've got a number of questions you'd like to ask. The only thing I'll highlight is that this is crisis management, so effectively we are still in the response stage, meaning that we are still responding to the incident that occurred, but also that we have also moved into recovery. And as you all know, recovery takes a lot longer than the response. And those 15 next steps that are broken, summarised in the report, shows that there's, this is where the thinking started. Different to other types of recovery though, we can't pull resources off the shelves to support this, because it's such a technical and quite complex issue that we are dealing with. So I guess the advice that I'm giving here is that this will take some time. There are some quick wins up front that we can move on pretty quickly, but as with any sort of emergency or crisis management, recovery part of this is going to take a lot longer. We would want to hope, I guess. So I'll leave it at that and hand back to you, Chair, for questions.
Thank you, Councillor John.
You, Chair Philip. No, thanks, Brian. Before I put the question, I did notice that it's a problem that most councils have, which I found interesting. And that one particular council was wanting to know what we were doing, because they want to institute similar protections or systems, perhaps. So I thought that was quite interesting. I'd hate to think of these big councils, how many staff were involved in dealing with this sort of issue. But the question I've got is, have all affected ratepayers been dealt with and are in the process, or have made their decision whether they will postpone or
No,
whatever?
not even, there's still a, make Sam help me out here, but there is still a handful of ratepayers that we haven't been able to contact. The number's not huge. There are still some that haven't made a decision in terms of which way they do want to go. We have sent out postponement options to everyone, even those undecided. And the good thing about that is some of them come back and sign the agreement to postpone it. And they were part of the undecided group. But in terms of numbers, I don't have them in front of me. I think Sandy's friends are pretty looking for those, but we are getting close. I think we are starting to see a bit of light, but we're not there yet.
Thanks very much, Mr. Chair. I have a few questions, so I can jump them forward or back or wherever you like.
Can I suggest just ask all your questions? Yeah. Right? Because we might be able to answer it. The chief executive, and then some of them might be interlinked. You might actually have one answer for a couple of them, so like sure. And then they're happy to do it any way you'd like. First of all, just I suppose a thank you to chief executive staff on finding a resolution to this. I know it's been really substantial, but in saying that, after reading, I just want to express my disappointment. And so I've got a few questions. I did email the chief executive a number of questions the other day, but a lot of those were around the people side. So I'm going to stay away from that side now, as the report sort of clearly shows that there's still work happening in that space. So I'll stay away from those questions. My first, though, looking at the report, what other financial processes do we have that are in nature like more manual processes that may also be at risk of not having adequate oversight?
In terms of the revenue and rates, or are you talking about?
Well, I suppose, has there been any reflection on this was a very manual process that we had, where the report shows that there perhaps wasn't the required level of oversight? Have we identified any other of our processes that could be at risk of not having adequate oversight that are manual in nature?
So I think, I guess the focus has been on the DD, so we're putting the majority of our resources to responding to that issue. And also moving into some of the steps that we need to take in terms of fixing the DD issue, but also preventing that happening again. And that's where we do have limited resources in terms of being able to manage both of those aspects. The wider financial side of things, I'm not aware of any triggers that would give me concerns at this point. Certainly think as part of the process, and it's probably not even just across the financial side of things, which is the focus now, is just making sure that we do check the oversights and the check-ins and the internal auditing that they are carrying, and whatever that has been picked up has been dealt with and escalated appropriately. So even though, I couldn't sit here and say absolutely nothing else is an issue. At this point in time, there's nothing else is concerned, but I think the learnings from this we can apply elsewhere within the business to ensure that things are picked up.
That's helpful. And I suppose having a look at that, it did jump out at me, this being a key sort of manual process, which didn't have an operational policy behind it that was specifically talked about. Have you had a look at any of our other key processes? And I think you'll probably see where some of the lines of these questions are coming from a risk perspective. We've identified this problem, we're addressing it. Wanting to sort of get some assurance that we are looking wider at some of our other processes. So have we had a look to see what other key manual processes or key processes that we have that currently don't have an operational policy?
I think maybe once going back to the rates and revenue side of things. Yeah, absolutely. And I think sitting with the team now and part of this role and seeing others that's supporting the team is to look at just not beyond just the DD issue as well. I think some of the recommendations that are in the report from Ross must push us down that path as well, especially when you're looking at some of those key tasks that are done by maybe staff within the team, but they're not actually the DD issue as well. So making sure we've got really good processes around that. So that's a work in progress at the moment. So that structure in terms of how they operate will change, and then making sure we've got all those operational procedures and that mapped out properly, and that we do have a better oversight in terms of those reporting lines. And for example, it might be that some of the functions of the rates of revenue team will move out of that and move into a financial team where there's actually more staff available to be oversight over it. So if I was to be completely honest, I think the DD issue is a symptom of a wider issue. So we've actually got to look beyond just the DD issue as well, and it's on the whole, every single task that team is doing. So that's what we're currently working through.
Thank you. That exactly is where I was going with that. So that's really helpful to get that. One thing that jumped out of the report, which I suppose was pleasing but not pleasing, was when this issue came up, I sort of scoured through some of the old reporting that we had and thought, as a governor, what could I have done to have identified it? What questions could I have asked? What could I have done to identify it? And it was clear from the report that we didn't know what we didn't know, so we didn't have information provided to us as a governance team. I know that there is some discussion in the reporting in your report, Brian, about the reporting that will come through to us, but is there any way that you can give us an assurance that reporting will be adequate for us to be able to pick up issues like this in the future?
It's a tricky one because, you know, you do rely on a number of factors to work to enable it. And your concerns is exactly the same as my concerns and maybe other members of the executive team to ensure that, you know, ask the same thing, what sort of more in terms of that oversight to ensure that this was picked up earlier around. And there's a lot of learnings for myself. So, you know, I've got to reflect as much as anyone else that's in charge of that teams as well. I do think, though, that the recommendations that are in the report and what I've summarised give us a bit more certainty around that being escalated, because it will be picked up in the CRM system. It will be picked up potentially with that increased oversight. So everything that we achieve here should then feed through into a better report that gives us a bit more assurance. Now, could I once again say completely that things won't get picked up? I can't, but I'm confident that the risk will be a lot less than what it is.
That is really helpful. And with your permission, Mr. Chair, my final
question.
if that's okay. And this question, Brian, and thank you for the answer. This one probably won't come as any surprise to you. When we're having a look at some of our system review that we need to do and looking at some of our processes, looking at resourcing teams, as Councillor Johns alluded to, has there been any conversations at this stage or any consideration to working with other councils in the shared services relationship when it comes to this process that operates in general? I reflect on the fact that 67 city district councils within the country, we all know we do things differently. Everyone does everything slightly differently, but in effect, they all do the same thing and duplicate it 67 times. So now we know that we have a challenge. Councillor Johns talked about a number of councils have these challenges. Are we giving any consideration to how we might be able to work with other councils?
Currently, other than a couple of brief conversations with other CEs, more generally around the whole concept of shared services. In WS, I think the way that our landscape's changing is going to push us in that direction anyway. In terms of the specific issue, probably nothing in detail at this point. I certainly think it's something that we do need to consider, and I think probably those conversations will come about when we look at changing our enterprise system and where we're at, because I think it's hard just to change one module within that system because it's used across the organisation in a lot of ways. So we'll think rather than maybe, yeah, I think, and just sort of question what I'm saying now, because there could be elements that there could be different as well, but I think we just need a bit more time to look into that and see what's available. Complexities around it, but certainly I think we do cover it in somewhere around looking at those system changes. But I don't have the answers to this.
No, I understand. Thank you for your indulgence. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Anything else for Sharon? I've got a quick question over here.
Thanks, Steve. Just a couple that have already been answered, but in the short term, I think the additional resource noted in 4.5, including debt management centre, is that Rebecca? I'm just trying to understand. I know we've had people coming in and doing stuff. So has there been some transition of the resource that we're tapping into?
So the additional resource, so DMC did come in help us with the initial stages of our response, I guess, in terms of meeting those impacted, but also sitting down with them, coming up some sort of some payment plans. The next step is to look at ongoing use of DFC, which those conversations already started with Roger and Alan, the DFC team to look at actually what they can take over. So in terms of some of that good management from the earlier stage rather than at the end stage. So that'll be part of that process going forward. Because the key thing that we picked up is that it's such a complex piece, and there's a number of steps that need to happen before something else can happen. And if you don't do these 3 steps, and that impacts those 3, so handing over some of that TNC, which is EWS, the Management Central, help alleviate some of that workload in terms of currently. And in my view, it's probably something to
Carrying on through you, Chief Philip, 4.6, the improvement of the inquiry management. I'm delighted to see that suggestion. I don't know about others, but I'm certainly fielding a few that I don't know who to send it to, and that's consequently why you got that email the other day. So are we being directed or encouraged now to make sure that anything we hear is reported through the CRM? Is that the direction you want us to send it now?
100%.
Okay.
100%. I think that there's a bit of work that has to happen in the background of the CRM systems and work to take those inquiries, because it is a new aspect of the system, but the direction will be that send anything through the CRM, they will do what needs to be done and send it on to the team member. And just got to get the email clocks down. Emails are still popping up and that as well, so we do need to try and sort of transition to the CRM system. So it is a work in progress, but that is one of that is probably the priority. Do you want to get to that, Sam?
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief. I guess just following on from Councillor Scott's some of his questions that he asked on the shape, but when we talk about thinking about frequent fair manual processes, I don't think back to the long-term plan, we saw some manual processes in that within the finance team, but also is there any other place within the organisation where it talks about in 5.9.5 where you've got a manager who's doing the process also does a check. If there are other areas within ranks or within finance where that same issue occurs and could be potential.
I think all of our managers are sort of a technical experts as well. So there's always going to be an element of doing both. I think what's happened within the revenue side is that it went too far one way and not enough in terms of the other aspect of those leadership roles around the checking, around the auditing, around the training, around the delegation, and those sort of factors. So you've got to get that balance right. From my view, my expectation is that our 30 managers still roll up their sleeves and get involved in the process, but they also need to keep an overview of who's doing what and where and any gaps in that process. And I think we need to do more work in that area on that. But as I said before, it is a good opportunity for us to check that across some of these other technical managers to ensure that they've got the support and that this is improving them as well. And as we get busier, everyone's getting busier, the world's getting busier, we tend to be doing a lot more doing. So we do need to just check on that to make sure it isn't sort of happening anywhere else.
Councillor Ellison.
Thank you, Chair Philip. Just a quick question, Brian. With that CRM reporting system, can that have its own category in our reports, please, so that we can actually identify it?
I'm pretty sure it can.
Thank you.
Councillor Sharon and Councillor Scotty.
Thank you, Chief Philip. Mine's just a quick comment. In section 5, we talk about risks. And, when I read the reputational risk, continued areas could Okay, well, not could, it will. And I really like how you've explained, we've got some short-term crisis stuff, we'll move into recovery. I think we as councillors need to get really serious about how we might recover our reputation out of this, because I don't know about other colleagues around the table, but I think this has heightened the sense of everything that's happening in council now is you get the phone calls or you get the questions, whereas I think in a different environment, if this hadn't happened, things might have been a little bit calmer on farm, as it were. So I'd be keen to see, as we move into a recovery plan, how we might address bringing the reputation back up. Thank you, Chair Philip.
100% right. So Philip and I just had
Yes,
similar,
can I
almost word for word.
Oh,
Can I, look, unfortunately for my sins, I joined the council, it was completely broke, right? In 1993, both financially, politically and management, right? Our rule collectively, both governance and management, was we had an unwritten, it was an unwritten rule, but everyone understood we need to do 20 things right in a row before the community started to believe us. So that actually requires both elected members and staff to actually have the same mindset. Because to me, we're all part of the same family, right? So that actually requires everyone to be working together. And it took probably, I would say, 5 years before we actually completely rebuilt, right? I think we exceeded the trust. I think when I was there, I don't know, it was a whole team event, right, for a long time. The council was a high performing council. I wouldn't say it's never. That's what happens if we go in cycles, and that's the issue. We don't. Everyone goes in cycles. The issue is, look, let's hope it wasn't a catastrophic failure, right? But it was a failure, right? The issue here is we now need to learn from it. We need to pull ourselves up, and we now need to move on progressively and say, yep, we've owned the problem, but it's going to take a wee while. Right? And that, to me, and I see it, indulge the committee, like the district council, they had a far more serious problem. I would say, and that happened in 2011, the council at this time, and I don't believe, I'm going to be political here, I don't believe the commissioners really actually own the problem as well. They are still having issues, in my opinion, with trust, not all the whole community, but with a certain group. Right? And you can work out how long ago that is, right? But again, you've got to take people on the journey to say, and I think that to me is, you've got this report, you've been open and transparent with it, right? It's open for everyone to see. And I think that's the first step. Okay. Councillor Scott.
Thanks very much, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Councillor Wolves, for raising it. So it's really important. I do have a question, Mr. Chair, actually wanting to utilise more this area.
Yep.
And this is a question I'm sure colleagues have had a lot as well. I certainly have throughout this process of asking why this wasn't, or perhaps should it have been able to be picked up by Audit. And that has been touched on within the report. I've heard quite a few answers from our team as to perhaps why that would be challenging for Audit to have picked that up. But I actually do think that we need to have a clear answer for that for our community. I would like, as an independent chair, someone who has some experience, I would appreciate your wisdom on the subject.
And thank you for that. Thank you for that. I think.
It was certainly a compliment.
The issue is, right, in order to their role, is actually to say, are the financial results fairly effective? So therefore, when they looked at the debtors, are the debtors actually fairly effective? Yes. Were there any underlying, okay, the only way an auditor would have picked it up would have been to look at the aging of the receivables in detail and say these agings is something not 100% wrong, right? But generally they don't look at that sort of detail. They look at trends over a period of time. They look at have you actually got now called impairment, have you got enough provision for doubtful debts for that's the old school, right? They would have probably looked at the old debts because these weren't showing up as old debts. That's the problem with why it was masked. Right? They weren't showing up significantly the least debtors, and therefore audit wouldn't have actually looked at them. Right? So that now I'm going to make a statement here. I think in a perfect council, you would have actually had an internal audit function. And over a period of time, you might have looked at processes and said, look, we actually don't have the right processes or systems functioning well here, and that needs to be. Right? And that, to me, as I've actually written down here, is a question that I think we need to consider as a committee and team, is what is the appetite from both us from the government's perspective and also the chief executive to say is what is our expectation on internal audit, because there's no such thing as a free lunch. So that to me would have been one way of potentially picking this up by writing. It may not have either, right? Because the issue is you look at your high risk. Now, and just going back to Councillor Johns or Councillor Peter's issues about other councils, the problem you have is the Rating Act was written in basically 2000, okay, 24 years ago. Technology has changed dramatically. Direct debits weren't really a thing 24 years ago. APs were, right, which are even worse.
Yeah.
And the legislation hadn't anticipated the direct debits. A lot of the systems. When was this put in, Peter?
This is,
Yeah.
I got 2000.
Yeah, 2000.
It was written about before 2000.
Yeah, all right, thank you. Look, I've dealt with another system that was written in the 1990s, right, and still being used today. Writing corporate information systems is horrendously complicated for a local authority. So again, as technology changes, the systems lag to actually keep up with systems like credit cards, right? We even people paying by their rates by credit cards, as an example, wasn't even thought about when that legislation was written, nor was the system handling credit cards. So you've got all these conflicting things. I think, and this is the problem that other councils are facing, is with as technology is not keeping up, where they're having to put in these manual lists or modifications to systems to actually make that work. And I think that's where Ross, he says, who else do you know that's using the system? So I rattled a couple of names off and gave them a couple of names. But so again, there are all sorts of other different systems that handle it differently as well. So there's not one, as you said, it's not one size that fits all. So to me, that's a particular issue. And rates also legally is as well. So that to me is actually the big test, that you actually set your rates incorrectly. Now you haven't done that, it's a collection process, right? There's been a few close shows, right? But again, it's a complex system. And the other issue with direct debits, it almost is personalised. It's not a standard, if you owe $1,500, make it easier in my brain, right? You owe $1,200 in your rates, therefore we require from you $100 per month in a story. And you go, well, I don't get paid monthly, I want to pay weekly, or I want to pay 2 weekly, or I want to pay monthly or something. So that's also a challenge, that even if you're trying to be really customer focused and tailor direct debit for that individual. So that requires a whole lot of manual. And that's where and the minute, where you're starting to save us, right? When you're using manual intervention, that's when the risk actually increases because of the risk of error occurs. Does that answer your question? Probably more so. It was very helpful.
Thank you, Chair. I certainly took comfort from our last finance meeting when we discussed our debtors reporting, and that Raj requested that have a separate line in the debtors report that actually only relates to this particular issue, so that we can actually see it changing as the reports come through. So that gives us a bit more comfort that we can actually see it.
Okay, thank you. You just answered my question because I had a question for Chief Executive on 4.4 on report back to council. I was going to ask when and how that was going to be done, but I think it's really happening.
That's good. It's a very cheap, but there's a couple aspects of that. So council. Right, so that's a good way to track how that total is reducing and those that can pay and they catch up. So you'll see those adjustments happen. So it's not just about us reporting on who we reported and who we sort of got agreements with. It's also the opposite when they come off these agreements and completely deal with it. That will adjust over time. The other aspect will be the reporting back on these recommendations to those progress reports. One of the customers that I have in the team is each one of these almost really its own project, because what sits behind it is a number of multiple steps that we will need to actually do to achieve that. And each one of those will have a specific timeline. So there's quite a lot of work to go through. Some of them are a bit more straightforward than others, but others will require pretty much your own project. And that's why that's sort of taking that recovery sort of look at this and do the recovery and all the different elements to this. So that's the bit that I think is going to take quite a bit of time. Some of those more complicated recommendations that are good, but once again, those resources and who we get on each one of those, we're still working through some of those specific timelines. I'll report back on those as well once we've done more of that work.
Okay, thank you. Any other? Thank you, Councillor Mike.
Through you, Chair, just thank you very much for that explanation. I actually needed that just to take in for me to reflect on that. I really like that. Thank you.
Any other? Oh, thank you.
Thank you for your Chair. I understand that we've put in more staff into help with this debt process of legal issue that we impact between this and stuff. Knowing that we've got some stuff that are no longer going to in here or are about to take some really, are we confident that we will be able to do the structure and process to review the whole revenue and finance department, and will that be any delay of being able to get through some of this aspect of it?
So a couple of work has started. So we are working on at that structure and how that will happen, and the process of that we need to get right as well, and looking at those individual impacts on the staff members that might or might not be impacted with it. We are carrying two vacancies. We're carrying one vacancy. We do have a team sick leave, long-term sick leave. We also have one staff member about to go extended leave as well, maternity leave. So that's great. Sort of stretching our resources quite a lot as well. So we have gone through recruitment programs for maternity leave. The only thing, the pause that I've pushed on this is just ensuring that rather than just going out and getting a role before we do the structure, we need to get that structure and then go to role. So I'm really keen on doing that over the next sort of week or two to have that finalised before that team. So then we can go and recruit, ensure that resource. So they're very stretched at the moment, and we are struggling actually just to keep up with the engagement, let alone some of the DD issues as well. So that's the problem we're having, is that you know, we could go to recruitment companies to get staff in, but it's actually not going to help. So we just probably got to work through our process. It might take a little bit longer while managing quite a considerable risk of that team at the moment due to that. So it's a bit of a juggling act at the moment.
Yeah, because I look at the risk that with it, you know, under section 5, operational risk and human resources. It's something that does concern me. We don't do that. But will actually reflect on our presentation.
Councillor Kerry, very good.
Thanks, Chair. Well, I think most of the council touched on a couple of things that I sort of had as well. Interesting, you mentioned council way back. And the problem, I go back to the first time the council in Parramatta was in 1995. There's Peter Rogers in the room and they recorded. I went asked him to discuss it, but the Parramatta Council was a significant significantly less than us financially and with staffing and everything's a year or so for something brand new. Just reflected all the details of that, but it was took a while to recover both internally and externally. But just going on from that, yeah, the report, I've been dealing with a lot of public thing in the space where I do run into it. And the initial, it was very difficult initially, and it settled down. I think the team's done a very good job, and I'm really happy with both reports. There are a few people out there who are pretty sped up. And Councillor Noma touched on, what I think is really important to us now is to do the best we can in managing the BAU, because what we don't want is some problems that keep occurring, or I don't want the same people. Or, so I think it'll take a while to get a reputation up. It's under siege by a few people. We're under siege. So I think we've got to get that right. But I can see the difficulty of the staffing systems. But that's the only thing. The only other thing, for some time, the rating part of our quarterly reports has been, I've never done this for a long time, really. Probably didn't do enough about it, personally taking some responsibility. But a lot of work went into it, but it was difficult to decipher. And it wasn't relevant in a lot of areas. But when I look back at a few of the things, one thing I did notice, back up, there was a lifting, but it was hard to see, lifting in data levels. And it happened with the rates increases over the last couple of years. There seemed to be an explosion. That was sort of noticeable to me. I just reflected. I kind of mentioned it to myself and didn't follow through. I think it's probably for our safety and perhaps reporting, we just need to get something in there that covers not only historically what we're doing with the dealers that we're trying to help out, but also just shows what's going on totally without standard rates, so we can sort of see it here. And I couldn't find anything that any reports of any other council, dozens of dozens that made me feel it's a great system. Many reports. So not for those. Yeah, it's really,
Thank you. Any other comments or questions? I've actually, with the committees, indulgence, I'd actually want to look at the recommendation. And I think it's great that we received the report, but I think there needs to be further consideration, and that a regular report back to the committee on the achievement of the progress of items assisted in the report. So I think that then will actually give governance, but also the community, show that yes, we have identified this is our plan, and we're working through it. Short term, yes, now we got I see one by Christmas. Well, Christmas is, I think, in 2 weeks. Right? Yeah. So again, so the next committee we want to see achieved, can't be achieved. It's sort of like a standard audit report that and we expect this bit to be signed off by end of February, etc. And I think that to me is what I would be looking for as part of the next. Was I moving it, was I? Okay. All right. All right. Did you get, so, Ali, did you get the resolution? All right. Thank you. Well, no further discussion? I just also just as speaking to the motion, don't normally do this, but I think it's actually good. We've actually addressed it and we're on the road, but we need to keep monitoring progress. I think that's really important. All right. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
As it's carried. Thank you very much, Mr. Chief Executive and your team. Right. Next item is we need a break to reduce insurance. Now let's do insurance. Insurance, we'll do insurance in a break. So page 37, 7.3. Are you in the hot seat, Sarah? Welcome, Sarah.
Good morning, Chair Philip and councillors. I've been tasked with help of a very good colleague of mine, giving a bit of an update on this insurance update that we've got. We've got the introduction around what was presented in the last Audit Risk Committee report, and then we've got key updates since the last report. So I think when Raj said at the last Audit Risk Committee, he said he needed to do some work, and we've gone away and we've done quite a bit of work in that space. And that's pretty much what the key updates are since the last report. We talked around reclassification of assets. So I've gone into a little bit of detail, but probably not a lot of detail. So I just want to give a little bit more context to that. Item number 4.11, we've said that the assets that were reclassified from infrastructure to the MDBI, which is just, I'm going to call it material damage because that's quite a mouthful if you don't mind, was the likes of our observation ponds, our reservoirs, the daily root impounded supply, but also within that is our reticulation network items that are above ground. So going to a water treatment plant, for instance, oh, I'm sorry, Hamish, if I ridicule this, there is valves, there is pumps, there is reticulation items that are associated with each of those plants, which is part of what the transfer has occurred. They were sitting under a reticulation, well, included in our infrastructure policy being reticulation. As you can see from that part of the report, having chatted to previous officers of council, that was there is no formal documentation, but it was around the risk appetite and the direction that was set for insurance at the time in which those insurance schedules were in place. I've gone back to 2014 as mentioned and spoken to the other officers. Also, as part of the review, improvement in asset data is the next probably key thing we need to talk about. So as part of the review, we've found that through water asset additions, because the insurance schedule is taken from our revaluation, the financial revaluation piece that is done every year, effectively the 3 water asset additions were just lumped together as additions rather than specifically allocated to each treatment plant. These assets were sitting on our infrastructure schedule, so should an event have occurred, they would have only been insured for 40% under that policy. These have now been reclassified and moved to the material damage policy as well.
More specific side.
Yes, yes. So in our insurance schedule, it's quite hard to just, it's a spreadsheet with about 500 different columns and lines, as you can imagine if you think of the number of assets. But in the material damage one, it is split between what a building or a structure to, what have I called it? Provision for reinstatement column to plant and equipment. So moving them into the plant and equipment space is where predominantly all the work has occurred. So I do have numbers around what that value change is, and I can talk to that if that is of interest. The next step is around the valuation update. So just gave you a bit of a background as to the difference between our buildings and our reticulation or free water assets. I'm sure you're all familiar with that, having been on the revaluation journey with finance through the annual reports. We have had the change in premiums, which is presented in the table format. I was not able to provide the detail around the value
each policy is insured for, because that's commercially sensitive information and not something that we should be making publicly available. And then probably the next, well, the key piece that I probably want to hone in on, and I know Brian does as well, is on the last page, page 40, is our next steps. There's a lot of work in this space. There's a lot of work that we need to do in this space. We've listed out quite a few next steps, but I think Brian wants to probably delve into it a little bit more. So I'll throw over to him.
Through you, Chair Philip. So yeah, I just want to highlight that there's still a fair bit of work to be done around the schedulings, and I think we need to take a bit more time to get these right. And earlier this week, I was at the NWS meeting, and insurance was a topic that we did discuss, and really the feedback we're getting is we've got to get the schedules right. And then if one thing was important, ensuring that done correctly, one is to ensure that our assets, we do have the right coverage for the right assets. But we're also now looking at, the direction of this council in terms of looking at some of our assets that we may no longer have. Do we actually need to be insuring them at all? Like if something did happen to burn down, what would we do? Would we build a battery? And we need to go through that process. And as my colleague here said, that there's more to this than meets the eye. So I'm not comfortable where those schedules are right now, I'll be perfectly honest. I don't think there's a real high risk though, but I do think we do need to spend a bit more time working on these. As part of that meeting, Aon has made one of their staff members available to work with councils to get these schedules right. And I know that a couple of councils within our region have taken up that offer and are currently working with a schedule. It does come at a fee, but I think potentially the savings or getting it right will be a good, be money well spent in my view. The other aspect of what we talked about is looking at the self-insurance part of this and what's come about. And some of the other Steve who lead the work were very keen on it, but pretty much said we're not going to go there now, but it just seems to be really complicated in terms of you can self-insure parts of an asset, but you shouldn't be self-insuring that part of an asset. And then looking at that 60-40 split between the government if you do have coverage. But the other thing we should look at it, we actually do have reserves. So some councils use the reserves as their insurance cover as well for particular assets. So I think what we're sort of hinting at here as well is ensuring that our insurance strategy that we should be preparing has this sort of painted for us in a way that we can do this a lot more simpler. We do need to check audit. Mostly our insurance asset information comes through the financial side, but we've really got to also make sure that it is connected well enough with our asset brand systems and everything as well. So I personally think there's still a lot of work to do in this space, and getting someone to support us that has those expertise. So that's just probably where I'm seeing conversation with the other SCs and our insurance.
Thank you, Councillor Peter and Councillor Sharon, Councillor Scott.
Thanks, Chair Philip. No, thanks, Brian and Sarah. I noticed that the final 6.8 or 6.71 officers have been working with elected members defining council's risk appetite. I guess we've been waiting to have that meeting to discuss whether we insure vehicles, for instance, or whether we insure buildings for demolition only, that type of thing. Is that going to happen in February?
I think that's probably more around getting that insurance strategy right.
Getting the schedule.
Yeah, and well,
Right.
yeah, both. We can't wait for the speakers as well. So what the process, I think maybe Sarah can talk about this better than I, but Wong always just gone through a similar process. I've actually reduced their insurance book by 700,000-800,000. I'm not saying we can do that, but certainly looking at strategies, exactly what you said there, Councillor Peter, about that direction. I'm going, actually, we'll run the risk there, not over there. And actually, you know, even looking at things like treatment plant, for instance, might fail or burn or whatever, would you actually build it back exactly like it is today? Yeah, we ensure it to build back exactly like. So you've got to look at the other strategies in terms of what the long-term plans might look like in terms of building back, better optimising your assets. So yeah, there's a lot to consider.
I'd probably just add a further comment to that. That risk appetite section, that was a crucial piece. That was your first step in what the insurance strategy is. We needed to work, Sandy might want to jump in and save me here, but we needed to work with you to find out what your risk appetite is, which is what Philip and Sandy and Stephen led a workshop on, so that's then going to enable you to have the next strategy session around it. Just touching on what Brian said with Wanganui, they've gone through and they've had all of the managers, I'm talking with them, they've put all of the managers in the room because material damage policy affects everyone in the organisation effectively. It's your cemeteries, it's your facilities, it's your treatment plants, it's your solid waste. One of the big things that they changed in their strategy was around what limits they had in place, something really simple, something really easy, but needing to make sure everyone in the organisation understood what the implications of those changes are. And that's something Aon are really willing and happy to work with us on.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Sharon.
Thanks, Chair Philip. The implications, I mean, I commend the slowly, let's cover off all our bases, but the implications for our annual planning process, I'm not sure when we pay our premiums. Is it across the year, or is it going to be status quo for this annual plan, or and how we might build in, if there are savings of that, how that flows into our annual planning process timing. Just curious to understand, it's just going to be status quo for this time, or would there be something to take a punt on?
At the moment, based off where we've landed with the premiums, they're due to go out on the 20th of December. They're what are listed in this report. Right. The annual plan budgets that we are preparing for 25, 26, sorry if we should mark on that, have included the same status quo for now, but doesn't mean that that's not something we can revisit before we get there. But as Brian has alluded to, this is a massive piece of work. And a lot of, in my opinion, a lot of stuff we need to really hone in on, and which we're doing, and we identified in the long-term plan around our asset data and making sure that we're not, the reliance isn't on the financial system, because that's not where the actual data of each asset is kept. So just, it's going to take time.
Yeah. Scott. Thanks very much, Mr. Chair. I suppose just firstly to endorse a little bit of what Councillor Johns was talking about. I think we've been talking about insurance even in the first annual plan that we had. Appreciate it is a whole lot of work. This annual plan is going to be a big annual plan, so even if we are looking at some quick wins, that's probably a conversation to workshop. I just did want to ask about 4.1.5 within the report. Thanks for preparing the report. This talks about, there's a note in there saying that these assets were insured for the entire period. And what I'd just like to check is, first of all, were they appropriately insured? If not, what were the cost implications, and probably more importantly, the exposure implications that we might have had?
Excellent question. Around the exposure, I couldn't probably quantify it for you right now. Good with numbers, not that good, so I do apologise. I guess where I probably stand, and from having engaged conversations with previous officers, they were potentially adequately insured from the decisions that were made at the time and the direction that was given. the direction has changed. We're wanting to ensure our risk appetite is so that our assets are insured for any possible event, which is what this reclassification has done. I don't know if I'm.
You can go in.
Yeah, no, I think it's just going back to sort of my comfort in that we've got this right with the schedules as well, and that's why we need to have another good look at ensuring that, one, that all our assets are adequately covered.
Yeah.
And I just want to make sure if I'm sitting here saying that to you, I'm comfortable with that, and I think I'm not. So I think, you know, I'm talking to some other staff here in the team that's one thing that we do need to do more work, because one is savings, but the other aspect is also making sure we do have the right coverage, especially for our critical assets. So that's why I think we need to pull in someone to get some support around this work to ensure that these schedules are correct, because that is the most important thing when it comes to insurance. But also looking at all the other things that Sharon talked about and council talked about in terms of that risk and what should we be actually insuring and how do we build back, rather than here's the cost of what it built back like, but actually our strategy is saying that people are doing this, maybe that's what we need to do.
And through you, Mr. Chair, I suppose in this, Sarah, you alluded to this in your answer of some of the discussions that you've had. Perhaps we were appropriately sure of the decisions taken at the time. It did jump out as a concern for me for just that we didn't have any formal records of decision making. So I was going to jump in there. I know that there's still work being done, so I'm not going to canvass the why in that yet. What I'm more keen to understand is, as we are making some further decisions now, can we have an assurance that the record of a decision making are now being put?
I fully support, I'm all about a policy, operational policy, any policy which way inclined that helps me determine what direction we're going and supports me with the decisions that we as operations team are making. So yes, I think I might have put it in the next steps, I might not, I can't remember. But it is something that we've worked with Aon as to around how can we have a policy, operational policy around, we've completed X asset, and determining which is the best policy, even a flow chart, a diagram, just a bit more information to help officers on the day make those decisions and to make sure we are adequately insuring everything.
And that's my final question.
I've got Stevie done, but this one may ask. Let's just pick up on your point, because I think that's when I was actually on my list, right? So you've stolen my thunder. Different, slightly, because what concerns me is there was this decision made, but it wasn't. The consequences were understood. It's a fair statement. What I would also like to see, putting my assurance hat on, is you've got this strategy, right? Insurance strategy, but give us some assurance, and that's the question I'll be asking: is how do Mr. Chief Executive, how do you give us assurance that you are complying with that insurance strategy and process? That's a question that I had. So this doesn't happen again, right? Because I think, it could have been financially catastrophic for the council. Right, now you can ask it, no?
Mr. Chair, you can still.
That's very scary. But are there any other?
Can I make a comment on that? Sorry.
Yeah.
Something we are working towards, and I think you might recall, Stephen's role as a risk and assurance officer was a new role that was introduced, and as part of that, his job is part of his work is to help us and to be the checker. You talked around segregation of duties in your report previously. This is our mechanism of a segregation of duties. The preparer of the insurance schedule shouldn't be the one to check it. It's prepared by the assets team, it's reviewed by the finance team, But then also as part of our process, we should be ensuring that our risk and assurance team have enough time to complete their review over it to make sure that we are adhering to these things. So that is something we internally are striving towards.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm sorry. Yes.
Just on that, it's good to see that the data's being entered into REM by folding for us. But is REM, I know they use that for roading as well, is REM our data? Do we own that information?
Yeah.
Good.
So I just want to be clear that facilities in the land and building information that I've been inputting that over the last 12, 18 months. I've done a lot of work in that space. It does not have the financial records attached to it yet. That is the next step in that phase. With regards to Three Waters, that is one of the big items we've identified in using the Better Off funding to help us to make sure that that is happening as well. So I don't want to sit here and say that it's complete and that all data is in there, because we are working towards it and we have identified that with the monitoring.
Okay. Any other questions, comments? Things quickly, Jeff Lovin.
Yeah, we thought about it a couple of years ago as part of something like project. The more we learn, the more difficult it gets. But over the years, Aon will ensure us used to come to the council table and give us an hour's presentation, and that solved our problems. Theoretically, probably usually mystified when they leave from the start. That's how we satisfied the assurance. They came along and they spreadsheets and gave the PowerPoint presentations. But they haven't been around for a while. So the reason for that, but rates, 2% of rates have been tacked on insurance fees since 2022, so that's a significant amount of money. One of the areas that I always worries me is the revaluations of insurance, and that's a real tricky area. Revalue for our balance sheet, but what fair value revaluations. I can see that it's not an easy fix, but the amount of money is so great. If we want to try and put a 1% rate it's probably in there. There's probably a get rid of 330,000 pounds. Not so quickly, but it's there. It's not. That's
might be a short-term gain for long-term pain, but yeah, right. Councillor Garron, thank you.
I just wanted to ask, so with reclassifying the infrastructure, that's what's brought the cost down in that area?
Yes.
Yeah. It's quite shocking to see that in the past 5 years it's doubled. Yeah, I mean, that just goes to show insurance has just gone through the roof, and it is, like Councillor Kerry has said, how important it is to really look at this area and help bring our rates down.
I would probably say that from 2023, our value that we're insuring in the infrastructure space has increased by 60 million. Which impacts, and that comes out of your financial valuations that you conduct every year. Yeah. And I don't forget, we've spent a considerable amount of money in our Three Waters over my term with council, so at least 8 years. Yeah.
Okay, and I also just, we haven't actually identified, but it's some insurance. If you look at the other month, and it's gone from 82 to 201, right? Some of that large amount is professional indemnity, and that is an ongoing risk for councils because of government. Right? That this is what keeps me awake at night. The government are now proposing that the building operators can then self seating, right? Whatever the word is, right? Who actually then is actually liable if there was a failure. So that's right, and that to me, I'm seeing many, and the problem we have in the country, and it's almost unique around the world, is local authorities are last man standing for every building that's been built, build a building C, irrespective of the value. In Australia, most states, it's only the local authority is only responsible for houses. Commercial buildings is actually the state, and they actually share the city. because they've actually got the power to take what the standard is. So here we are, we will see the standard, we've got to administer it, but also liable. That's my look statement for today. All right, and on that note, do I have a mover for the rec? Oh, one last thing. Are we going to see an update? You say we're going to get an update on this, just confirming in the February meeting?
That is of the 10 years claims, and it'll probably, I'm looking at LEV public service.
And I think the other issue too is it'll be useful just if you could add into your progress on these other issues as well. Thank you. All right, do I have a mover for the recommendation? Thank you. Give a second to councillor. Aaron, I think we'll second it. All those in favour, please say aye. Carry. Can we adjourn for 10 minutes, please? Thank you. item 7.4 on page 41, our environmental scan. In the hot seat. Now, you're in the hot seat, mate. Right? You'll take your detailed scan as read. Are there any key highlights or further information you want to bring to the committee attention?
Well, councillors, I think there's just a couple of things, obviously, if you're aware of a whole lot of things that are going on from I think overall we're seeing the impacts of this lack of resources in the asset bubbles from a few years ago starting to work their way through. Cost of the interest rates having the effect. It's been a tough year. There's a couple of sectors that are suffering a lot worse than others. Construction is a disaster zone around the country, and the cost of building has resulted in basically very few homes being consented right now in terms of outside of the main areas, and there's very few consents coming through the tower for new housing. And this is impacting on some of your assumptions in the long-term plan. So unfortunately, the growth rate has eased off. I think on the balance of evidence, it's probably at the worst static and some small growth going on. But we had assumed that the majority of that growth is going to happen in the urban areas, which has a pretty big impact on waters and so forth. That has not been the case later in this last financial year. There's very few new housing consents. When I talk about new housing consents, I talk about relocatables as well. They are mostly new homes. They're just not consented in Tararua. They're built in factories and homes. And so there's a number of different trends going on here which will impact council going forward in terms of treatment. And that. So the majority of homes that are coming in are going into the rural lifestyle areas, pretty much. Period. And so, you know, but they're not on Three Waters. And they're not generally consented in terms of a new house in Tararua, which means they're not being built with local labour and trades materials. They're being built in a factory in Arsenal or somewhere else. So that's quite a big trend change. And when you see the size of Build Smart residential in terms of their facilities and Arsenal building, you can see the whole sector is changing going forward. And it's very much more likely to just continue on that way. Your house arrives within 12 weeks, fully consented, fully decorated, with appliances, with a code of completion certificate. And your investor will develop. There's no risk, almost no risk in terms of that process. And the building price has to be cheaper as well. So yeah, it's the whole construction sector is going through changes greatly. So because of that, and as tough as you see, lots of companies folding. I guess the other sector that's really struggling is retail, and it's not just from people tightening their belt; it's just the online that's happening more and more as well, and that's unlikely to change as well. So it just gets more and more. So the actual demand for physical space is reducing all the time. This is happening in cities that are growing as well as small provincial towns that aren't so much. Yeah, so that has obviously some impacts. But so the growth rate in terms of what was in the long-term plans probably at the moment is probably undershoot, which has a small effect in terms of number of rental properties. And the growth CapEx needed to cope with three waters and things like that. We're also seeing that growth that is very much concentrated in older people.
You got a question?
Well, to do with housing,
Yeah.
so it's a question of well at the end or.
I know you might be looking at.
No, thanks, Malcolm. That relocatable homes thing, I think it's just a new phenomenon, probably worldwide. It's cheaper to build houses, in fact, than it is outside. That's why we're seeing a whole lot more of them than we did 10 years ago. But also, I think in our district, the fact that we've got a new district plan coming out and rezoning will allow a lot of these, particularly relocatables, to go into the urban areas. At the moment, that's not the case. There aren't suitable sections for them to go. That's why they're buying 5 acres out the Pintock Road or wherever. So I don't think it's quite as clean cut as you suggest in that regard, with due respect. The other thing is the assumptions we've made in the growth strategy is a 30-year, that's a plan for 30 years, not just this year or next year even. And we need to be cognizant of that we're not making decisions now based on what's happening now, making decisions for the future based on what's happening right now.
All right, look, I'll accept that, Cass. There is a reality though that if you're buying a home, even a relocatable one, you're buying an existing section of the urban area, you put the house on, keep everything up, and do the landscaping and so forth, you're unlikely to be able to sell that house for the cost of what you've done, which has always been quite controversial, but it's a real struggle in terms of when you do the maths. It doesn't stack up as an investment in current interest rates. I mean, if you're 100% equity, it does. So probably the only other thing that's different is there's a huge amount of risk that's just arrived growing in the last few months worldwide in terms of what could affect our profitability in terms of tariffs and so forth. I'm not even going to attempt to forecast that, but you know, it's just the reality, and anything could happen there. But what has been happening in the last 3 or 4 months is that the product prices have increased significantly. And season 24-25 is looking a hell of a lot better than season 23-24 in terms of rural farm profitability. I did put a piece in the stand with a bit of inflation adjustment, just so that record dairy price payout is still, because costs have gone up 25% in the last 2 or 3 years. It's not the highest payout in real terms in the last 2 years. But hey, it's a hell of a lot better than what it was last year. Not to be sneezed at, and sheep prices have been going up. Beef prices are looking very strong and looking very good until next year. So the Americans are eating more burgers. Our beef values go up. Crazy, but they don't. They take our best steak and make it. So, you know, affordability wise, urban's looking pretty tough. All residential urban's very tough. One thing that is noticeable though, is in the number of price indices in capital goods, producer price indexes and stuff like that. There's basically, outside of insurance and a few other bits and pieces of government and local government prices and that, the cost of materials and products and services are basically as close to zero. Out between 0 and 1% in the last 12 months. Farm price cost index is actually negative slightly. But what I'm saying is that, it'll be an interesting discussion possibly next year's revaluation for council in terms of, prices. A lot of the big capital goods price index stuff is running at less than 1%. Anecdotally, putting out tenders for construction projects at the moment, there's companies falling over themselves, competing to try and get the work. And in quite a few cases, the costs are actually falling.
Thank you. Any further questions? Councillor Sharon, thank you.
Yes, just if we go on to some of the LTP assumption part of your report here, Malcolm, I'm just curious to understand the Whakakotani funding, current trend against assumptions. PAR is still 73%, but higher shrunk. We've been told what we're going to get from NZTA. But you've got a question mark there, continue with elevated local funding. What was the thinking behind?
Thinking was, you made a decision in the LTP when the FAR last went up.
Yeah.
Rather than reduce the roading rate, so you were spending the same amount of money, you kept your contribution the same as what it was before.
Okay.
But I'm just questioning whether or not, and I'm sure you'll tell us, is that, there's a point where you might actually start spending some rates money with no, that's not exactly when you fund it.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
that's a bang for your buck decision, and service level decision. But the reason, the logic that led to that decision, now that the pie's smaller, you might not necessarily be leveraging it the same way that you would in trade since previously. And the other thing in that, last week, they announced that changes to the emission trading scheme around pine tree stuff. So that's these things are arriving at us all the time. That has actually going to have quite a major impact on land use going forward in the Road, particularly on those class 6 and 7 lands, which is the majority of Tararua district. Because it means that if you're not in its first industries, 15,000 hectares across the whole of New Zealand, farming conditions. And so that means that there'll be a whole lot less. The market's already, the carbon price has already dropped almost 10% in the last few days, because the market's seeing that as a big restriction on the amount of trees that can be planted. But it will mean that you won't get those river tracks planted. So that's quite a big one. The other one that we're all still looking at, everyone, is the new freshwater national policy statement. When that comes out, that could have a material impact on your existing CapEx program in a positive way.
Thank you. Councillor Scott.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Thank you very much, Malcolm. We've had some joy receiving the environmental scan. I suppose throughout there, and you've explained now and you've painted a bit of a picture about some of the costs that council might have to face. Insurance is stubbornly not moving, but some of our other costs are starting to potentially reduce, which could have an impact on our annual plan. But when we were having a look, and you were sort of looking at some of the specific government legislative changes or things potentially on the horizon, one of the ones that has jumped out at me that I think is a huge risk for us that I don't think is mentioned here is the government's potential proposal to introduce rate scaling. The rate scaling could have a dramatic impact on us, particularly if the bill remains stubborn have you given any thought to the impacts that, and look, some of that might be a good thing, but we don't know what it looks like yet. Potentially, they're going to be looking at doing it in New South Wales or perhaps a Victorian model. But that's going to completely change the game, the way we do things.
Thanks, Scott. Yeah, I didn't put it in there because it's sort of a public document. Sort of put up in the air, but my personal view is that if enough councils actually go out and proposing next year at 10% plus, I think this government will have said, that's it. We are going to impose rules upon you because we clearly can't trust you. They're not interested in the detail. They're not interested in the drivers for the number. They're just interested in the number. And I think there will be some move to hold back rate increases at some point because we are in terms of the election cycle. Yeah, and all that sort of stuff. So I could see, and the answer would be, you know, like you're not allowed to go over 5% or whatever. And when councils say they can't possibly do it, they say, well, clearly you need to government or do something else, and that's not our problem. So I would be, you know, as a few councils like talked to us here, you know, just from a strategy point of view, and I know it's a long way away from where you are, but you know, to get your head below the parapet in terms of what the government's looking at, it probably need to be, you know, close to 5%. Otherwise, it's like, no, we put you on notice last year. Because I remember there was some comments around that from key ministers. And
Key minister.
Key minister. And it'll be interesting to see go. But when you look at it from a straight political point of view, you know, the vast majority of voters would agree with, because they don't know the detail. So yeah, it'll be interesting. As you say, around back over different countries, going back a few decades, there's been all sorts of responses like that. And long term, it leads to all sorts of problems and crises because all of a sudden you can't do enough renewals, can't depreciate properly and all that sort of stuff. But politics is it's a funny game at times, and that's what can happen. So, yeah,
Mr. Chair, it's best for us to be trying to make some of those decisions rather than.
Yeah, I know you're sort of rocking a hard place in terms of some of the stuff. That freshwater national policy statement is quite an important one. But again, the only way it's going to achieve savings is by reducing the standards that you have to achieve. So, that's and I think, and then not just for next year, but the year after, the Three Waters SCO stuff is probably the start of another whole round of shared service amalgamation type discussions.
Thank you. Can I quote the minister, right, from his cabinet paper that was made public, right? Basically, he was saying, draft LTP 24 shows a potential greater average increase of 15%, right? That's what you write. Rates increases put additional stress on ratepayers already faced with high costs of living pressures. If this pattern of rates increases continue, property rates may become unaffordable for household and businesses. Consequently, councils may lose their social licence to operate, which potentially presents sustainability issues for the sector. So that's what he actually said in his cabinet paper. Right? So that's the benchmark. If you're actually becoming unaffordable, right? Then I think I agree that the Three Waters or the reform, one of the reform that actually then takes is a 2 or 3 waters. But I think that threshold standards and the standards to be released by Tanaka Hawaii, the new consents, may actually positively impact on future capital costs.
The problem you have is a timing issue.
Oh, absolutely. Timing, absolutely.
Right. All that sort of stuff. And I think response, is which piece of legislation would you like us to breach?
Oh, excuse, I've already got one councillor that is already writing to the minister say we are reaching several pieces of legislation because we got them. Be interested to see his response. Right, any further discussion? Oh, Councillor Sharon?
Just one wider one, Malcolm. I mean, in your little red boxes through this report, you kind of hint that maybe some of the stuff that we might be planning in growth or district planning changes, etc. The timing of it, you kind of, there's a couple of bold statements around the timing. Is there anything in a nutshell where we go into our annual planning process and say, might want to cut back the focus on that area, and I reflect on the timing of some of our infrastructure development into urban expansions in the short term. Is there anything that if there was 2 or 3 things that we as a councils had to just keep an eye on out of the impact of what you've described here, that we should probably tweak a bit with our planning thinking? Tough question, but
Yeah, it's, I think back to that, the standards for the waters and the freshwater policy statement, I think could be used as a catalyst to pause stuff.
right.
So that you weren't going ahead to build infrastructure that is, would be seen as being unnecessarily gold plated.
Yeah.
But you know, it's, these things are always a judgment call. It's very difficult. But you know, there's no evidence that the population's declined.
No.
There's no sudden surplus of rental properties in the towns, and it's still only a couple available. I mean, conversely, I can see in Palms North there's been a huge increase in houses for rent. There's a significant amount of people that have been unable to sell at the price that they thought they were going to get before they go and rent them out. But that's not just at lower level; it's actually right through the housing structure. So there's 2 houses for rent. So yeah, it's different. There's nothing. I don't think there's anything. There's like one particular thing. It's just a series of things that if you would, and you know, when you're trying to save money in year 1, effectively, pushing out capex doesn't necessarily help you that much. It helps in year 3, 4.
Right, any further questions or comments? We technically don't have a recommendation here, but I'll just suggest we just move the receipt of the environmental scan December 24. Do I have a mover? Oh, goodness, I think Councillor Kerry by a whisker. Right, seconded Councillor Sharon. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Carried. Thank you very much, Malcolm. Next item, 7.5, page 81. Our work safe notice prior year to treatment plant. Thank you, Stephen. Probably doesn't require too much introduction since the majority of us actually visited the site yesterday. Thank you for that. Right.
Mr. Chair, everyone. Absolutely. So we've been on site, and these notices are as a result of WorkSafe coming on site. What I'm really pleased about is we had a good conversation with WorkSafe, and they were happy and had no issues with the remedial plans we have in place around the gas vapor issue. But as you can see in the report, they did want to make sure that we had a good, robust maintenance process in place because of the higher rate of corrosion, and that we did review the chemicals that we were using. And all of those actions are in play now. So there's
questions? Thanks, Sharon. Thank you.
Thanks, Chief. But my question is around the timing of some of this, Stephen. I mean, in 3.5, Council proactively notified WorkSafe on the 23rd of May WorkSafe visited and approached council on the 5th of November. Now, I appreciate that's there, as you not as, but, and further down were the actions that have completed by the 28th of February. So I guess I'm questioning how important a priority was this, that was there anything within our own processes that even though we're notified on the 23rd of May, we did things or we didn't do things? Or, oh no, I'm saying with 5th of June, a remedial action plan was put forward. But yeah, I mean, May to November before any, not important, but you know what I'm saying, any compliance type action was being taken. Is that acceptable in your view? I don't know. I haven't had a lot of experience with WorkSafe processes, but yeah.
Yeah, so thank you. So WorkSafe acknowledged, so yes, firstly, immediately after we had received the report from WSP about the situation, we developed the remedial plan, which is the one that WorkSafe were provided with as well immediately, and have not given us any feedback about what they've said is they had no issue with it. See if what we're doing is the right thing. So they didn't specifically give me any guide on why their response was so slow. However, I guess the initial incident was back in the initial finding was back in 2021, the first time that we knew about the missing. So that was the dated report. So maybe that sort of drove their non-urgency around it. And the other thing is that they didn't, it wasn't a formal process, it was a request to come on site and visit. So they didn't formally require us to have them attend. So I think in the framing of the correspondence that we had was around understanding the wider situation at the plant and the hazards that the plant had, and to have conversation around any advice that they could give us or any burnings. They mentioned burnings a few times. So it was like it was more of a general look at the whole site rather than specifically the incident.
Thanks very much, Mr. Chair, and thanks, Stephen, for the report. I think we covered off a chunk of this, what I certainly didn't, and got some comfort from this yesterday, some prior conversations when this came to light. I did just want to make a comment around, I suppose, how pleased I was with the openness of inviting WorkSafe, or actually not seeing a request for them to come to site, and they weren't using the legislative authority to do it. It was a request in the interest of learning and taking that on board. And I think as we further develop our safety maturity, I think these things are really positive from the government's level to see that even if we may have some recommendations come through and actually some requirements come through, we don't see that as a negative thing in this committee or from the staffing perspective, that is a positive thing to continue to grow, to continue to develop. So I thought that was important to have in there, because although we have improvement notices, I think there does need to be some recognition that we could have been difficult about that and not got them. So thank you for those.
Any other questions?
It's Chair Philip, and yesterday was hugely beneficial going on the site and being able to see that, and actually having read the report prior and going to see those actions. And I was pleased to see, the ventilation in the room being opened, that was referred to, because I think prior to that visit, I would be written a comment around what was in place for vehicles for staff that lived in there. And I see that you've identified reasons why there has been, because with people being able to choose someone provider and that change with the council system. You've got the contractor-based company program about to be launched. How far away exactly is that, just so that got some reassurance that that's really close, because that was one of the things that highlighted to me yesterday.
Yeah.
Just around staff's health.
So the contractor health monitoring is in place for our solid waste team, and yes, we have had some health monitoring done. And maybe I'm just going to look towards Jimmy to give an exact date, but we've had preliminary meeting with the three waters team, and we're expecting. I should just look at this account. We're expecting to have the actual health monitoring in place. If you refer, that's actually in the next report along. We've got the date, 28 February 2025, our target date. So we're expecting to have that in place very early. And we will be reporting back to you on the progress of that.
That's what I was looking for, is just having that identified and knowing that it's coming, but actually get to know that.
So that's our target date that we're working towards.
Any other questions? I've got one just clarification. I think we just need to put it on the record. The second compliance notice that was issued about substances should be tracked and not tracked on site. You mentioned verbally yesterday that you disagreed with that. Is that?
Yes. So
you want to comment on that?
Yes.
The process.
Sure. So as our three waters team experts have always have pointed out to us as well, this is a complicated piece of legislation around hazardous substances management. And based on our reading of the legislation, there is a gap between the WorkSafe tool that gives us advice on how to monitor hazardous substances and the legislation that they're basing the tool off. So what we're doing is we are going back to them with that discrepancy and to see where we land, because based on how we are reading it and how our contractors who deliver on site with the chemicals, we are doing the right process as it stands. So we'll bring that back to you as well once we get a resolution.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Providing you a response back.
Right.
All right. Any further questions? Okay. We've got a recommendation there. Can I have a mover, please? Councillor Scott, seconded. Oh, Councillor Aaron, thank you. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Carried. Don't run away. 7.6, page 85. Page 89, sorry.
Yes, so this is a report into the health, safety and wellbeing work plan for 2025. Jimmy and I we've taken the opportunity to revisit the work plan and to really ensure that it matches, it is aligned with our health and safety policy, the recommendations from the health and safety audits that we've had done, and our risk and hazard register. And so working through that process on page number 5, we've got the key projects for 2025 with the timelines, and we're putting back to you on the progress of those. Including at item 4, including the indicators, the lag and lead indicators that we have generally been reporting, but this is formalising it into a structure that we will be coming back to at each meeting.
Any questions, councillor Scott?
Just a quick question. Thank you. I'm really glad to see this format with the dates where we can monitor and to some count the meeting. Our request in there, and I just more double checking the completion date. If there's any changes to those dates, can that be noted? What I don't want us to have to do is to be comparing to side by side, and that date has moved out a month or two. That even if we're not going to meet it, we keep that in there and we can make notes. On the final page, we've got the health and safety manual update, which is not scheduled to be updated until the end of 2025. Just wanting to get some assurance that the current manual, if it's been flagged to be updated, is currently still fit for purpose.
So it is adequate at the moment. How I put it. So what we're wanting to do is currently it's generally based around our intranet, our internal internet page for health and safety, which is a real challenge to maintain because that piece of software is no longer supported and it's difficult to manage. We're moving from that until we get better internet in place to hard copy, which we have a draft version in place now. It also is a two-step process because we need to redo the policy. I think when we look at the policy with you each year, we're wanting to take some big strides forward in the policy, particularly around covering off well-being, covering off how we work together with contractors, and how we work on our continuous improvement system. So there's some quite, and I don't think working on the manual before then is going to be quite good. Even though we are making small edits as we go, that's right, isn't it? So she's sort of looking like to maintain it, but we're not looking at like the big upgrade.
So I have confidence it's adequate. And just one final question, Mr. Chair. Can I just double check some of our statistics that you put through as within the management report? Were they due to be within this committee or within today's meeting, or were they due to come to our next committee?
Yes, so next committee, because this was originally a special meeting, it was expanded.
Fine, I just.
Yeah.
All right, thank you. Thank you. Any further questions?
Yes. Can I ask, through you two, sorry, with your health and safety and wellbeing work planning or your policy, does the smoke-free policy come under you? For
it's a risk here. So you mean smoke-free as in smoke-free? Yes, so that
that does come under
yes.
you. And that is due for a review.
I don't have that in front of me.
Stephen will look it up and circulate for
Yeah.
members of the committee with the result. Thank you. It's a really good question.
I just knew.
Can I? I've got one question. Contractor management, you're going to have that standardised induction and monitoring by May.
Yeah.
But then in terms of your lead indicator, I thought that would actually be a really good lead indicator.
Yeah.
The results of your contractor monitoring would be a really good lead indicator. I don't quite yet be yet? Is it because you haven't done it and you'll update it once it's been done?
That's exactly the right answer.
I've answered the question, right, but I just want assurance that that was done, because I see,
We've had that conversation.
I know we've had that, and I know I'm sorry, I'm gonna be harping on about that, because to me is that's for our responsibility as a PCBU. We need, as a committee, need assurance that staff are monitoring health and safety, right? And we need that assurance. You can answer, absolutely.
Wonderful. So as part of the work that we're going to be doing around the critical risk reviews as well, is about looking at some of those key indicators and monitoring the effectiveness of our controls. So part of that will come back as part of our standard reporting once we've hit that.
My last question is, because it's such a critical risk, is 31st of May too late. I know you've got a whole lot of other pressures on you, right? That would be my only comment. But, and I look at the chief executive in my rear vision, because he's the one who goes to jail, not me. Right. Any further comment? So can I have a mover for the recommendation? Councillor Scott, seconded Councillor Ellison. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. No further business. We've got no late items. Just a question before we close the meeting. Have a very safe and merry Christmas and a happy New Year. Look forward to seeing you all in February. All safe and well, and having hopefully a bit of a break. Thank you very much. Oh, no, we'll just close the meeting because you've got subsequent meetings for the close of Karaki at the end of the day. All right, thank you very much. Thank you for your spirited bidding team.
Thank you.